Hey everyone. Tonight we were stepping into a world of stone walls and whispered prayers into the quiet heart of a medieval monastery. Not the warmth of a noble's hall, nor the bustle of a village hearth, but a place of silence and discipline where sleep was as much a trial as it was a rest. Imagine walking through long cloisters after dusk, the echo of sandals on flagstones fading into stillness. Oil lamps flicker against bare stone, their light weak against the vast cold of the night. The dormitories are lined with straw mattresses, rough wool blankets, and bodies pressed close, not for comfort, but simply to survive the freezing dark. Fires are forbidden here, the rule demanding endurance. Each breath hangs white in the air, rising like incense in the unheated chambers. For these monks, the night was not just an absence of day, it was a test of body and spirit. Prayer ended the evening, silence swallowed the hours, and the midnight bell tore them from uneasy dreams to return to worship, shivering on frozen floors. Hardship was seen as devotion. Sleep itself was measured, interrupted, offered up as sacrifice. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I always find it fascinating to see this quiet community stretch across the world. Now dim the lights, maybe pull a blanket close and let S drift together into the stone-cold silence of the medieval monastery, a place where every night was endured, not escaped. Part 1. The Cold Stones of Faith, the Cloister at Dusk. The last mournful notes of the Vespers chant have faded, leaving behind a silence so profound it seems to have a physical weight. The sun has long since set, its final watery light draining from the high, arched windows of the abbey church, leaving only the deep, velvety indigo of a late autumn evening. The monks, their voices now still, file out of the choir stalls, their movements slow and deliberate, their woolen habits rustling softly against the cold stone floor. This is the hour when the medieval monastery truly begins to retreat into itself, when the world of work and communal prayer gives way to the deep, interior quiet of the approaching night. And with the darkness, the cold begins its slow, inexorable invasion. Let us follow the silent procession of monks as they move from the relative warmth of the church, which has held the faint, lingering heat of their bodies and the candles, into the open-air heart of their world, the cloister. The cloister is a covered walkway, a square arcade of stone arches that surrounds a central, open garth or garden. It is the main artery of the monastery, connecting the church, the chapter house, the refectory, and the dormitory. It is a place of profound architectural and spiritual beauty, but it is also a place that is fundamentally open to the elements. As the monks walk, their footsteps echo on the cold flagstones, the sound magnified and softened by the vaulted stone ceiling above. The air in the cloister is now several degrees colder than it was in the church. A damp, chilling breeze drifts in from the central garth, carrying the scent of wet earth, of decaying leaves, and the faint, clean promise of a coming frost. The monks pull the hoods of their habits up over their heads, their hands disappearing into the deep, warm folds of their sleeves. Their breath, which was invisible in the church, now begins to plume in the air before them, small, white ghosts of their own life force, instantly swallowed by the deepening chill. This is a world built of stone, and stone is a merciless conductor of the cold. The great, thick walls of the abbey, the massive pillars that support the arches, the flagstones underfoot, they have been slowly, patiently absorbing the cold of the day, and now, as night falls, they begin to radiate it back into the air. To lean against a pillar in the cloister is to feel a deep, penetrating cold that seems to suck the very warmth from your bones. The monastery is not a shelter from the cold, it is a vessel for it. The monks do not hurry, their pace is governed by the slow meditative rhythm of their rule. They are on their way to a brief period of reading before the final prayer of the day, Compline. They might go to the library, a small, unheated room where the precious, hand-copied manuscripts are kept, their vellum pages curling in the damp air. Or they might sit on the stone benches that line the inner wall of the cloister, their backs against the frigid stone, and try to read a sacred text by the fading, almost non-existent light. The light is a precious and a scarce commodity. There are no great blazing torches here. The primary source of light is a series of small, flickering oil lamps set into niches in the stone walls. They give off a tiny, localized pool of warm yellow light and a faint, greasy smell of burning animal fat or vegetable oil. Their light is barely enough to read by, and it creates a world of deep, profound shadows. The vaulted ceiling above is lost in an absolute inky blackness. The far corners of the cloister are impenetrable pools of darkness. The monks, as they move between the lamps, seem to appear and disappear, their dark-robed forms materializing out of one shadow and melting into the next. The silence is almost absolute. The sounds of the outside world, the distant barking of a dog, the lowing of a cow in the monastery's grange, are faint and muted, filtered through the thick stone walls. The only sounds within the cloister are the soft, rhythmic sounds of the monks themselves, the shuffle of their leather-soled shoes on the stone, the whisper of a turning page, the occasional soft cough, quickly suppressed. This is a world that is deliberately stripped of all sensory comfort. The hardness of the stone, the penetrating cold of the air, the dimness of the light, the profound silence, all are part of the monastic discipline. They are meant to subdue the desires of the body, to turn the mind away from the distractions of the material world, and to focus the soul on the contemplation of God. The cold is not just a physical discomfort, it is a spiritual tool, a constant physical reminder of the harshness of the world and the need for a spiritual warmth that can only come from faith. But for the human body, it is a profound and unrelenting trial. The monks, who have likely eaten only one simple meal that day, and who have been awake since before dawn, are now facing the long, cold, and difficult ordeal of the night. Their bodies, with their limited reserves of energy, must now find a way to survive until the morning. As the bell begins to toll for Compline, the monks rise from their benches and their books. They leave the cloister, their silent procession a river of dark shadows moving through the pools of faint, flickering lamplight. They leave the cloister to the night, to the cold, and to the deep, echoing silence. The wind sighs through the empty arches, a lonely, mournful sound, the only voice left in this cold, stone heart of faith. The monastery is settling into its nightly vigil, a long, quiet, and deeply cold struggle for a warmth that is as much spiritual as it is physical. Let your mind rest in this deep, cold, and profoundly peaceful silence. The bare cell. After the final calming prayers of Compline, the monks proceed to the place where they will spend the next few precious hours of rest. This is the dormitory, the dormitorium, and it is a place that is as starkly disciplined and as devoid of comfort as every other part of the monastery. To enter the medieval monastic dormitory is to enter a world that has been stripped down to the absolute bare essentials of sleep. Let us follow a young novice into this great, communal sleeping chamber. The room is a long, high-ceilinged hall, often located on the upper floor of the eastern range of the cloister, above the chapter house. The only light comes from a single, carefully tended oil lamp, the veilleuse, which is required by the rule of St. Benedict to be kept burning all night. Its light is faint and weak, doing little more than making the darkness visible. It casts long, distorted, and slightly menacing shadows that dance on the bare stone walls and the great, exposed timber beams of the roof high above. The air in the dormitory is frigid, colder even than the cloister below. The heat from the monks' bodies during the day has risen and dissipated through the high roof, and the cold of the stone walls now dominates the space. The young novice can see his own breath, a small white cloud in the dim, flickering lamplight. The silence is profound, broken only by the soft, shuffling sounds of the other monks preparing for sleep. He goes to his designated space. There are no private rooms, no individual cells in the early Benedictine tradition. The monks sleep together in this great open hall, their beds arranged in neat, orderly rows. This is a deliberate choice designed to foster a sense of community and to prevent the sins of idleness or private indulgence that might occur in the solitude of a private room. His bed is a simple, almost brutal piece of furniture. It is a low, wooden frame on which rests a pallet or mattress. This is not a soft, feather-filled mattress. It is a rough, lumpy sack made of coarse canvas, and it is stuffed with whatever cheap insulating material is available. Most commonly, it is straw, which must be changed regularly to prevent it from becoming a damp, rotting, and vermin-infested mess. In some monasteries, it might be stuffed with dried rushes or even horsehair. It is hard, it is lumpy, and it rustles with every small movement. On top of this mattress is his bedding. It consists of a single thin sheet of rough, unbleached linen or hemp, and one, or at most two, blankets. The blankets are made of a heavy, coarse, and intensely scratchy wool, known as wadmal. They are not soft and comforting, they are a purely functional object, designed to trap a small layer of the body's heat. They are often thin and worn from years of use, their insulating properties diminished. And then there is the pillow. It is not the soft, yielding object we know. The monastic pillow is often a simple, hard, cylindrical bolster, stuffed with straw. In some stricter, more ascetic orders, it might be nothing more than a small, shaped block of wood. It is designed not for comfort, but to support the head and to discourage the kind of deep, luxurious sleep that was seen as a form of sensual indulgence. This is the entirety of the monk's sleeping world: a hard pallet, a scratchy blanket, and a wooden pillow. It is a bed that offers no luxury, no escape. It is an instrument of the monastic discipline, a tool for the mortification of the flesh. The discomfort of the bed is a constant physical reminder of the hardness of the spiritual path, a small nightly participation in the sufferings of Christ. The young novice prepares for sleep. According to the rule, the monks are to sleep in their clothes. He does not undress, he simply loosens the leather belt of his habit, lies down on the hard, rustling mattress, and pulls the single, scratchy woolen blanket up to his chin. He lies on his back, his hands folded over his chest, in a posture that is reminiscent of a body laid out in a coffin. He is surrounded by the sounds of the other sleeping monks, the rustle of straw as a man turns in his sleep, a soft, muffled cough, a low, weary sigh. And as the night deepens, the sound of snoring, a ragged, unbeautiful, and deeply human chorus that fills the cold, dark hall. He is cold. The single blanket is not enough to ward off the deep, penetrating chill that radiates from the stone floor and the uninsulated walls. He curls himself into a tight ball, trying to conserve every last precious bit of his own body heat. Sleep does not come easily. It is a shallow, fitful state, a constant, low-level struggle between the body's desperate need for rest and the profound discomfort of his surroundings. This is the nightly reality for the medieval monk. Sleep is not a release, not a luxury. It is a necessity, but it is a necessity that is hedged about with rules, with discipline, and with a deliberate and spiritually meaningful hardship. Let your mind rest on the stark, simple, and deeply quiet image of the monastic dormitory. See the rows of still, dark-robed figures lying on their hard, simple beds. Feel the profound, penetrating cold of the air. Hear the soft, rustling sounds of a room full of uneasy sleepers. Wool against the chill. In the long, cold, and fireless nights of the medieval monastery, the primary and most intimate defense against the biting chill is not a structure or a technology, but a simple, ancient, and profoundly effective material. This is the world of wool, the thick, scratchy, and life-sustaining fabric that is the monk's second skin, his constant companion, and his primary shield against the cold. Let us examine the clothes of the monk as he lies on his hard, straw-filled pallet. The rule of Saint Benedict, which governs every detail of his life, is very specific about his attire. He is to be given 2 tunics and 2 cowls, one set to be worn, while the other is being washed. These are not garments of fashion or of comfort in the modern sense. They are a uniform of poverty, of humility, and of a deep, practical functionality. The primary garment is the habit, a long, simple tunic, usually made of a heavy, undyed wool. The colour is the natural colour of the sheep from which the wool came, a range of off-whites, greys, and dark browns. This is why the Cistercians were known as the white monks, and the Benedictines as the black monks. The fabric is not the soft, refined wool of a modern garment. It is a coarse, heavy, and oily material. The wool has been minimally processed, and it still contains a high proportion of its natural lanolin, the greasy substance that makes a sheep's fleece waterproof. This lanolin gives the habit a distinctive, slightly gamey smell, but it also makes the fabric remarkably resistant to water and to cold. The monk wears this habit day and night. The rule explicitly states that the monks are to sleep clothed with their leather belts still on. This is partly for the sake of modesty and decency in the communal dormitory. But it is also a practical matter of readiness. The monks must be ready to rise at a moment's notice for the night offices, the prayers that are said in the middle of the night. There is no time for the leisurely process of dressing and undressing, and most importantly, the habit is the monk's primary layer of insulation. He lies on his bed wrapped not just in his single blanket, but in the thick, heavy layers of his own clothing. The wool is a miraculous material. Its thick, crimped fibers trap millions of tiny pockets of air, creating a natural, insulating barrier that slows the loss of his own precious body heat. The texture of the wool is a constant physical reality. It is intensely scratchy. Against the skin, it is a perpetual, low-level irritant, a hair shirt worn not just as a special penance, but as a normal part of everyday life. This constant, mild discomfort is seen as another tool of the monastic discipline, a way of subduing the senses and reminding the monk of the fallen physical nature of his body. Over the habit he wears the scapula, a long, narrow piece of cloth that hangs down the front and the back, and the cowl, a great hooded garment with long, wide sleeves that is the distinctive mark of the monastic life. In the cold of the dormitory, the great, voluminous hood of the cowl is not just a ceremonial garment. He pulls it up over his head as he sleeps, creating a small personal tent of warm, trapped air around his head and shoulders, a crucial defense against the cold drafts that sweep through the long hall. His feet are likely clad in woolen stockings and perhaps in the simple, soft leather shoes that he wears during the day. To sleep with cold feet is to be cold all over, and the monk understands this simple, practical truth, and so the monk sleeps in a cocoon of wool. It is a multi-layered, scratchy, and probably lice-infested cocoon, but it is a cocoon nonetheless. It is the simple, ancient technology of the shepherd, adapted to the spiritual warfare of the monastery. The wool is a product of the monastery's own economy. The great monastic orders, particularly the Cistercians, were among the most sophisticated and successful sheep farmers and wool producers in Europe. The sheep that grazed on the monastery's vast green granges provided not only the raw material for the monks' habits, but also a major source of the monastery's wealth. The wool that keeps the monk warm at night is the same wool that is sold at the great cloth fairs of Flanders, a tangible link between the monastery's spiritual life and its powerful role in the medieval economy. Let your mind feel the rough, scratchy texture of the heavy woolen habit. Feel the deep, slightly greasy warmth that it provides against the profound, penetrating cold of the stone room. It is not the soft, easy comfort of a modern bed. It is a hard-won, functional warmth, a warmth that must be earned through the acceptance of a constant, low-level discomfort. It is the warmth of survival, the simple, profound, and deeply reassuring protection of the fleece of the sheep, a creature that is itself a powerful symbol of the Christian flock and its good shepherd. Breath in the darkness. We are in the great stone dormitory in the deepest hour of the night. The single oil lamp burns with a low, steady flame, its light too weak to penetrate the far corners of the immense, high-ceilinged hall. The world is a vast, echoing chamber of darkness and of cold, and in this darkness the room is filled with a single, soft, and continuous sound. It is the sound of breathing. Let us listen. It is the sound of 50, perhaps 100 men sleeping in the close communal quarters of the dormitory. Each man is an island of life in the cold stone ocean of the room, and his breath is the tide of that life, the physical manifestation of his struggle to survive the night. The breath of each monk is visible in the frigid air. With every exhalation, a small white cloud of condensation appears in the darkness, illuminated for a fleeting moment as it passes through the faint beam of the distant lamp. It is a plume of steam, a ghost of the warmth that is inside him, a warmth that is constantly being lost to the cold, hungry air of the room. The dormitory is filled with these small, rising and disappearing clouds, a silent, visual symphony of the body's slow, constant loss of heat. The sound of the breathing is a complex and multi-layered thing. There is the slow, deep, and rhythmic sound of the men who have found a measure of peace in their uncomfortable beds. There is the fitful, shallow breathing of the men who are tossing and turning, unable to find a comfortable position, unable to escape the gnawing cold. There is the occasional soft whimper or a muttered word, the sound of a man lost in a troubled dream. And there is the loud, ragged, and sometimes comical sound of snoring. The dormitory is a great, echoing chamber, and the sound of a single, powerful snorer can reverberate through the entire space, a constant, disruptive presence in the quiet of the night. But after a while, even this sound becomes part of the room's familiar nocturnal music, a rough, human counterpoint to the more ethereal sound of the wind outside. This shared breath, this shared sound, is a powerful, if unspoken, form of community. The monks are forbidden to speak during this time of the great silence. They are meant to be alone with God in the solitude of their own souls, but they are not truly alone. They are surrounded by the physical, auditory presence of their brothers. The sound of another man's steady breathing in the darkness is a quiet, unconscious reassurance. It is a sign that you are not the only one who is cold, that you are not the only one who is struggling. You are part of a larger collective body, and you are enduring this ordeal together. The shared breath also has a more practical physical effect. In this large, cold, and unventilated space, the combined body heat and the moisture from the breath of 100 men will, over the course of the night, slightly, almost imperceptibly, raise the temperature of the room. It will never be warm, but the deep, killing frost of the early evening will be tempered, its sharpest edge blunted by the simple, cumulative effect of so much life being lived in a single, enclosed space. The dormitory becomes a human-powered heating system, a slow, inefficient, but nonetheless vital one. But this shared air is also a source of danger. It is the primary medium for the spread of disease. A single monk with a cough, a lung infection, a consumption, is exhaling the agents of his sickness into the air with every breath. And every other monk in the room is inhaling that same air, those same invisible seeds of disease. The dormitory, which is a place of communal endurance, is also a place of communal vulnerability. The breath that signifies life can also be the carrier of death. Let your mind float in the cool, dark air of the dormitory. Listen to the soft, slow, and deeply peaceful rhythm of the breathing. It is the sound of life at its most fundamental, its most stripped down. It is the sound of a community, huddled together in the darkness, sharing the cold, sharing the silence, sharing the simple, profound, and unifying act of drawing one breath and then the next. Part 2. Rituals of Rest, Compline's Last Light. Before the monks surrender to the cold and the darkness of the dormitory, they gather one last time for the final, and perhaps most beautiful, of the day's rituals. This is the office of Compline, the last prayer of the day, a service that is designed to be a gentle, spiritual threshold between the world of waking and the world of sleep. The bell tolls, its slow, measured and calming notes, calling the community from their period of evening reading. They file, once again, into the abbey church. The great cavernous space is now almost completely dark. The vastness of the nave is lost in an impenetrable blackness. The only light comes from a few small candles burning on the main altar, and perhaps a single, larger candle that has been lit specifically for this service. The light is a tiny, precious island in a great, dark ocean of stone. The monks do not go to their usual choir stalls. They gather, more informally, at the front of the church. Their dark-robed forms a huddle of shadows in the faint, flickering candlelight. The atmosphere is not one of formal, liturgical grandeur. It is one of quiet, intimate, and weary devotion. The service of Compline is short, simple, and deeply peaceful. It begins with a confession, a collective acknowledgement of the sins and the failings of the day that has just passed. The monks ask for God's forgiveness, for a purification of their souls before they enter the vulnerable state of sleep. Then they chant the psalms that have been appointed for this hour for centuries. The psalms of Compline are psalms of trust, of protection, of a quiet, confident faith in God's watchfulness through the dark hours of the night. They chant Psalm 4, "I will lay me down in peace and take my rest, for it is Thou, Lord, only, that makest me dwell in safety." And Psalm 91, "He shall defend thee under his wings, and thou shalt be safe under his feathers. Thou shalt not be afraid for any terror by night." The melodies of the chants are simple, gentle, and hypnotic. They are the musical equivalent of a lullaby, a slow, rocking, and deeply reassuring sound. The monks' voices, which may have been strong and powerful during the day, are now soft, subdued, and perhaps a little weary. The sound rises and falls in the darkness, a wave of pure, serene, and ancient peace. The service concludes with a hymn and a final, beautiful anthem to the Virgin Mary, the Salve Regina, or the Alma Redemptoris Mater. This is a plea to the Mother of God, the great compassionate intercessor, to watch over them through the night, to protect them from the demonic temptations and the terrifying nightmares that were believed to haunt the darkness. The abbot then gives the final blessing. He takes a small vessel of holy water, the aspersorium, and he walks among the monks, sprinkling them with the blessed water. This is a ritual of purification and of protection, a final physical sealing of the community against the forces of darkness. The drops of cold, holy water on their faces and their habits are a tangible sign of God's grace, a spiritual shield against the terrors of the night. And with this blessing, the last light of the day, the last sanctioned use of the human voice comes to an end. The last candle is extinguished. The monks have now officially entered the profound, sacred, and strictly enforced period of the Great Silence. They have been fortified by the prayers, soothed by the music, and protected by the holy water. They have been spiritually prepared for the ordeal of the night. The service of Compline is a masterpiece of psychological and spiritual preparation for sleep. It is a ritual that is designed to calm the mind, to soothe the anxieties of the day, and to create a sense of deep, profound, and divinely protected peace. It is a spiritual warmth that the monks will carry with them from the relative shelter of the church into the deep, literal, and unrelenting cold of the dormitory. Let your mind rest in the quiet, candle-lit intimacy of the Compline service. Hear the soft, gentle, and hypnotic rise and fall of the chant. Feel the cool, surprising, and purifying touch of the holy water. It is a moment of perfect, profound, and deeply peaceful closure at the end of a long and difficult day. The Great Silence. The last purifying drops of holy water from the Compline service have dried on the monks' faces. The last candle has been extinguished, and now, as the monks move in a silent, orderly procession from the church to the dormitory, they cross an invisible but absolute threshold. They have entered the time of the Great Silence, the Magnum Silentium. From this moment until the first service after dawn, the speaking of a single, unnecessary word is a serious fault, a breach of the monastic rule that is seen as a sin to be confessed. This silence is not merely an absence of noise. It is a positive and a powerful spiritual discipline. In the philosophy of the monastic life, the tongue is a dangerous and unruly organ, a source of gossip, of anger, of pride, and of the idle, worldly chatter that distracts the soul from its true purpose, the contemplation of God. The Great Silence is a nightly fast from words, a deliberate and disciplined quieting of the self, so that the small, still voice of God might be heard in the interior landscape of the soul. As the monks settle into their hard beds in the cold, dark dormitory, the silence that descends is unlike any that we, in our modern, noise-saturated world, can easily imagine. It is a deep, profound, and almost tangible thing. It is broken only by the small, involuntary, and deeply human sounds of the sleeping community. The rustle of a straw mattress, a soft cough, the whisper of the wind in the rafters, the distant hooting call of an owl from the woods outside the abbey walls. For the monk lying awake in the darkness, the Great Silence is a powerful and a challenging companion. There are no distractions. There is no conversation to pass the time, no music to soothe the mind, no story to follow. He is left entirely alone with his own thoughts, his own fears, his own spiritual struggles. In this profound quiet, the mind can become a noisy and a turbulent place. The anxieties and the resentments of the day can rise to the surface, unbidden and unwelcome. The temptations of the flesh and of the spirit can seem to be magnified, to whisper in the ear in the deep, silent darkness. The struggle to quiet the monkey mind, to achieve a state of peaceful, prayerful contemplation, is a difficult and a nightly spiritual battle. But the silence is also a great gift. It is a space for a deep, honest, and unfiltered communion with God. In the quiet of the night, a monk can examine his conscience, can feel the true weight of his sins, can experience a profound sense of repentance and a deep, personal longing for God's grace. The silence is a mirror reflecting the true state of his own soul. This silence is not just an individual discipline, it is a communal one. The fact that every other man in the room is also participating in this vow of silence creates a powerful, shared atmosphere of peace and of reverence. To deliberately break the silence to whisper to one's neighbor would be a profound betrayal of this shared spiritual trust. It would be a selfish and a disruptive act, a tearing of the delicate, sacred fabric of the night. The monks do have a way to communicate if it is absolutely necessary. They have developed a sophisticated and beautiful language of hand gestures, a monastic sign language. A monk who is feeling unwell can, with a few simple gestures, communicate his need for help to the infirmarian without speaking a single word. But this language is used sparingly and only for the most essential of communications. The great silence is the great, invisible and powerful container in which the monk's night is held. It is the backdrop against which the drama of their dreams, their prayers, their struggles with the cold, and their longing for the dawn is played out. It is a discipline that shapes their souls, that fosters a deep interior stillness, and that turns the long, dark, and difficult hours of the night into a profound and a powerful spiritual exercise. Let your own mind sink into this deep, profound, and healing silence. Let the noise of your own day, the endless chatter of your own thoughts, fade away into this great, peaceful, and sacred quiet. There is nothing that needs to be said, nothing that needs to be done. There is only the stillness, the darkness, and the slow, deep, and restorative rhythm of your own breath. Shared dormitories. In the cold, dark, and silent world of the monastic dormitory, the monks sleep in a way that is fundamentally different from our modern, private ideal. They sleep together in a single, large, open hall, their beds arranged in long, orderly rows. This practice of communal sleeping is not an accident of architecture. It is a central and a deliberate part of the Benedictine monastic tradition, a practice that is rooted in a deep understanding of both the practical and the spiritual needs of the community. Let us stand in the middle of this great sleeping hall and consider the reasons for this arrangement. The first and most obvious reason is a practical one, and it is a reason that is central to our story: the sharing of warmth. A single, lone individual, sleeping in a small, unheated stone cell, would lose their body heat to the cold walls and the frigid air at a catastrophic rate. Their chances of surviving a truly cold winter's night would be slim. But by bringing 100 men together in a single, large room, a different thermal dynamic is created. Each monk is a small human furnace, constantly radiating a small amount of heat into the surrounding air. The cumulative effect of 100 of these small furnaces is significant. The shared air of the dormitory is warmed, not to a level of comfort, but to a level of survivability. The deep, life-threatening chill of the stone is blunted by the simple, collective presence of so many warm bodies. And the monks sleep side by side, their pallets often separated by only a foot or two of open space. The radiant heat from one man's body helps to warm the small pocket of air around his neighbor. They are, in a very real and a very physical sense, keeping each other alive through the simple, unconscious, and life-sustaining act of sharing their own precious bodily warmth. But the reasons for the shared dormitory are not just practical, they are deeply spiritual. The dormitory is a powerful tool for the suppression of the individual ego and the fostering of a communal identity. There is no privacy here. There is no room for personal vanity. for the accumulation of private possessions, for the secret, hidden life that a private room allows. Every monk is visible to every other monk. Their sleep, their restlessness, their snores, their quiet, sleepy prayers, all a part of the shared public life of the community. This radical lack of privacy is a form of humility. It is a constant physical reminder that the monk is not an individual, but a member of a larger body, the body of the monastery, which is itself a small part of the great mystical body of Christ. The individual self, with its desires and its pride, is meant to be dissolved into the larger collective identity of the brotherhood. The shared dormitory is also a tool for maintaining discipline. The rule of St. Benedict specifies that a candle must be kept burning in the dormitory all night. This is partly for practical reasons, to allow the monks to see their way when they are called to the night offices, but it is also so that the abbot or the prior can at any time walk through the dormitory and see that all is in order, that the monks are sleeping in their habits, that there is no improper behavior. The constant potential presence of the watchful eye of authority is a powerful disincentive to any breach of the rules. And so the shared dormitory is a complex and a paradoxical space. It is a place of profound physical intimacy, but it is an intimacy that is completely devoid of personal affection or friendship. The monks are closer to each other physically than most modern family members, but they are bound by a vow of silence and a discipline that discourages the formation of particular friendships. They are brothers in Christ, and their bond is a spiritual and a collective one, not a personal or an emotional one. The midnight bell. The dormitory is in its deepest state of rest. The silence is broken only by the soft, rhythmic sounds of breathing. The monks are in the grip of their first, precious, and deepest sleep of the night. And then the world is shattered by a sound. It is the sound of the abbey's great bell, the great clock of the Middle Ages, tolling in the bell tower. It is not a gentle, melodic chime. It is a loud, commanding, and utterly uncompromising summons, its deep bronze notes rolling out over the sleeping monastery and the surrounding countryside. This is the call to matins and lauds, the night offices, the prayers that are said in the dead of the night at what is often called the vigil. The sound of the bell is a physical and a spiritual shock. It tears the monks from the warmth, however meagre, of their beds, and from the precious, restorative oblivion of sleep. In an instant, the dormitory is filled with the sounds of movement, the rustle of 100 men sitting up on their straw mattresses, a collective, weary groan that is quickly suppressed, the soft, shuffling sound of feet finding their way to the floor. There is no time for a slow, gentle waking. The discipline of the rule is absolute. From the first toll of the bell, the monks have only a few minutes to be out of their beds, in their proper order, and on their way to the church. The first and most brutal sensation is the cold. The monk's body, which has spent the last few hours building up a small, fragile pocket of warmth under its woolen blanket, is now exposed to the full, shocking, and ferocious cold of the dormitory. And the floor is a sheet of ice. The monks are not wearing warm slippers. They are either barefoot or are wearing simple, thin, leather-soled shoes, and the shock of the frozen flagstones on the soles of the feet is a moment of pure physical agony, a shock that is designed to jolt the body and the mind into a state of immediate and absolute wakefulness. They do not speak. They are still in the great silence. They move in an orderly, silent procession out of the dormitory and down the stone night stair, a special staircase that leads directly from the sleeping quarters into the transept of the church. This is a brilliant and a practical piece of monastic architecture designed to allow the monks to get to their prayers as quickly as possible without having to go out into the freezing open-air cloister. they file into the vast, dark, and even colder church. The air in the church is a deep, cellar-like cold, a cold that has been stored in the great, thick stones for centuries. They take their places in the choir stalls, their bodies shivering, their teeth chattering. And then they begin to sing. In the profound, cold, and echoing darkness their voices rise, chanting the long, complex, and beautiful psalms and lessons of the night office. This service can last for 2 or 3 hours. It is a long, cold, and incredibly demanding vigil, a spiritual battle fought against the body's desperate, overwhelming desire to return to the relative warmth and comfort of sleep. This nightly interruption of sleep is one of the most difficult and the most defining aspects of the monastic life. It is a radical rejection of the normal biological rhythms of the human body. It is a deliberate and a powerful act of asceticism, of self-denial. The monks believed that the middle of the night was a special and a spiritually potent time. It was the time when the world was at its quietest, when the veil between the earthly and the heavenly was at its thinnest. It was the time when the devil and his demons were believed to be at their most active, and so it was the time when the spiritual soldiers of the church needed to be awake on guard and at prayer, fighting a spiritual battle for the soul of the sleeping world. And so they sing, their voices a small, brave, and beautiful thread of human consciousness in the great, dark, and sleeping void of the night. Their breath plumes before them in the candlelight, each note a small white cloud of prayer. They are cold, they are tired, but they are fulfilling their sacred and their nightly duty. Let your mind be lulled by the distant, imaginary sound of the midnight bell. Feel the profound, shocking, and life-affirming jolt of the cold. And then hear the beautiful, ethereal sound of the monks' voices rising in the deep, cold darkness of the ancient church. Part 3. Enduring the cold, fireless nights. In our modern world, the solution to the problem of a cold bedroom is a simple and an almost unconscious one. We turn up the thermostat, we use an electric blanket, we add another duvet to the bed. But for the medieval monk, these solutions were not only unavailable, they were, in a profound sense, undesirable. The cold of the night was not a problem to be solved, but a hardship to be endured, and the primary reason for this was a simple and an absolute rule. There were to be no fires in the sleeping quarters. This rule, laid down in the Rule of Saint Benedict and followed by most monastic orders, was rooted in a deep and a very practical fear, the fear of fire. As we have seen in our visit to the medieval tavern, a medieval building constructed of timber and thatch and filled with straw and dry textiles, was a tinderbox. An open fire in a room full of sleeping and largely unsupervised men was a recipe for a catastrophic disaster. A single stray spark from a hearth could, in a matter of minutes, reduce the entire dormitory and perhaps the entire monastery to a pile of smoking ashes. The risk was simply too great to be taken, and so the dormitory was a fireless space. The only exception was the single, carefully shielded oil lamp that was kept burning for light, and this was tended by a designated monk with the utmost care. But for warmth, there was nothing. The monks had to face the raw, unmitigated, and often brutal cold of the night with nothing but the clothes on their backs, their single blanket, and the strength of their own endurance. This fireless reality shaped every aspect of their sleeping lives. It is why they slept fully clothed in their thick, woolen habits. It is why they slept in a communal dormitory to share their collective body heat. It is why their bedding was stuffed with insulating straw. Every detail of their sleeping arrangements was a subtle and a desperate adaptation to a life lived without a central source of heat. But the prohibition against fire was not just a practical safety measure. It was also a powerful expression of the monastic ideal of asceticism, of self-denial. Warmth, like a soft bed or a delicious meal, was seen as a luxury, a sensual comfort that could lead the body to softness and the soul to sin. A warm, cozy bedroom was a place that encouraged a deep, luxurious, and slothful sleep, a sleep that was the enemy of the monastic ideal of vigilance and of constant, prayerful watchfulness. The cold, by contrast, was a powerful spiritual tool. It was a constant physical mortification of the flesh, a way of subduing the body's desires and of reminding the monk of his own fallen physical nature. To endure the cold night after night without complaint was an act of spiritual discipline, a way of training the will, of building a spiritual fortitude that could be used to fight the more subtle and more dangerous temptations of the soul. The cold was a form of prayer. The monk could offer up his physical suffering, his shivering, his aching joints, as a sacrifice to God, a small personal participation in the sufferings of Christ on the cross, or of the martyrs who had died for the faith. The cold was a way of purifying the soul, of burning away the dross of sin and of worldly attachment through the slow, cold fire of physical hardship. Of course, there were some exceptions to this strict, fireless rule. In the infirmary, where the sick and the elderly monks were cared for, a fire was permitted. The Church was practical enough to recognize that for those whose bodies were already weakened by age or by illness, the ordeal of a fireless night might be a fatal one. And in some monasteries there was a single, heated room, the calefactory or warming room. This was the only room in the entire monastery, apart from the kitchen and the infirmary, where a fire was kept burning. The monks might be allowed to come here for a brief period each day, to warm their hands and their feet, to thaw the ink in their inkwells, to find a few precious moments of relief from the relentless grinding cold of the rest of their world. But this was a rare and a carefully rationed luxury. For the long, dark hours of the night, the rule was absolute. The dormitory was and would always be a fireless and a deeply, profoundly cold place. Let your mind appreciate the deep, still and absolute cold of the fireless dormitory. It is a cold that is honest, that is pure, that is unadulterated by any artificial source of heat. It is the cold of the natural world, of the winter night brought into the very heart of the human dwelling. Straw and blankets. In the long nightly battle against the cold, the monk's bed is his fortress, his last line of defense. And the primary weapons in this fortress are humble, simple, and deeply organic. They are the twin technologies of straw and blankets, the basic and the essential tools of medieval sleep. Let us look again at the monk's mattress. It is a simple sack of coarse woven hemp or linen, a palliasse, and its contents are the key to its function. It is stuffed, not with feathers or with soft cotton, but with straw. This is usually the straw of oats or of wheat, the byproduct of the harvest from the monastery's own fields. To us, a straw mattress sounds like the very definition of discomfort, and it is certainly hard and lumpy, but for the medieval monk, the straw is not just a cushion, it is a piece of insulation technology. The secret to its effectiveness lies in the hollow structure of the straw stalks. Each stalk is a tiny tube, and these millions of tiny hollow tubes trap air. This trapped air creates a thick, insulating layer that slows the conduction of heat from the monk's warm body down into the cold, heat-sucking mass of the stone floor or the wooden bed frame below. To lie on a thick, well-stuffed straw mattress is to be separated from the great cold heart of the building by a cushion of still, insulating air. But the straw has its disadvantages. It is a perfect home for a host of unwelcome bedfellows. Fleas, lice, and other biting insects thrive in the warm, dark, and humid environment of the mattress. The monk's night is often a battle not just against the cold, but against the constant itching torment of these tiny, blood-sucking creatures. The straw also absorbs moisture. The dampness of the unheated dormitory and the moisture from the monk's own breath and sweat is drawn into the straw, causing it to become compacted, to rot, and to give off a damp, musty smell. To combat this, the mattress must be regularly emptied, the old, rotten straw removed and used as animal bedding or as compost, and the sack refilled with fresh, dry straw from the barn. This is a major and a recurring piece of monastic labour. On top of the monk there is his other primary tool of insulation, the blanket. It is made of wool, as we have seen, a material that is perfectly designed by nature to trap air and to provide warmth even when it is damp. But the quality and the thickness of this blanket are a matter of great importance. The rule of St. Benedict simply states that a mattress, a blanket, and a pillow are sufficient for a monk's bed. But in the colder climates of northern Europe, a single, thin blanket was often not enough. The records of monasteries often show debates and dispensations being granted for the provision of extra blankets, or of blankets that were lined with fur. The sheepskin itself, with its wool still attached, is a powerful and an ancient form of bedding. A monk might have a single sheepskin to lie on top of, its thick, oily wool providing a soft, warm, and water-resistant barrier between his body and the straw mattress. The way in which the blanket is used is also crucial. The monk does not simply lie under it. He wraps himself in it, creating a tight, cocoon-like enclosure that minimizes the amount of his body that is exposed to the cold air. He will tuck the edges of the blanket under his body, creating a seal that traps the warm air that is generated by his own metabolism. And so the monk survives the night through a simple but an effective system of insulation. He is sandwiched between two layers of trapped air, the air in the straw mattress below him and the air in the woolen blanket above him. He is a small, warm core protected from the great cold universe of the dormitory by these two humble and profoundly effective layers of medieval technology. Let your mind feel the rough, comforting, and slightly scratchy texture of the woolen blanket. Imagine the faint, dry, and earthy smell of the clean straw in the mattress. These are the simple, honest, and deeply reassuring sensations of a basic and a hard-won warmth. The layering of habit. The monk on his straw pallet is not just wrapped in a single blanket. He is, in fact, wearing a complex, multi-layered system of clothing, a personal and a portable architecture of warmth that is his first and his most important defense against the cold. The art of layering is a key to his survival. Let us build this system of layers from the inside out. The innermost garment worn directly against the skin is a simple linen or hemp shirt, the staminia. This is the monk's underwear. Linen is not as warm as wool, but it is softer and more absorbent, and it provides a crucial barrier between the skin and the intensely scratchy, coarse wool of the outer garments. This shirt is rarely changed, and it is often a haven for lice and other vermin. Over this, the monk wears his first tunic, the tunica. This is a long, simple, A-line garment with long, narrow sleeves. It is made of a heavy and often undyed wool. This is the basic all-purpose garment of his daily life. The rule of St. Benedict, with its practical Italian-born wisdom, specifies that in colder climates the monks should be provided with a second, heavier tunic, a pollitia, which is often lined with a soft, warm fur like lambskin or even cat fur. This fur-lined tunic is a precious and a valuable garment, a significant concession to the brutal realities of a northern winter. It is worn over the first tunic, creating a thick, double-layered, and highly effective insulating core. Over these two tunics, the monk wears the scapula, the long, narrow apron of cloth that is the distinctive mark of his order. And over all of this he wears the great, voluminous and hooded garment that is the final and the most powerful layer of his defense, the cowl or the kukala. The cowl is a vast, tent-like garment, often made of the heaviest and the thickest wool. Its long, wide sleeves are so large that the monk can draw his hands and his arms completely inside them, as if into a muff. The cowl is a personal, portable, and wearable shelter. As the monk lies down to sleep, he arranges these layers with a practiced skill. He pulls the great hood of the cowl up over his head, creating a small, warm, and protected microclimate around his face, trapping the heat from his own breath. He can draw his arms inside his sleeves and can even pull the long front part of the cowl up over his legs, creating an extra tent-like layer of insulation over his blanket. He becomes a self-contained, multi-layered, and highly efficient system for the preservation of heat. Each layer of wool traps a layer of air, and it is these layers of still, trapped air that provide the insulation. He is like a human onion, his warm, living core, protected by a series of concentric, insulating layers. This system of layering is not just for the night. It is the monk's constant companion through the cold winter days. He wears these same layers as he stands for hours on the cold, stone floor of the church, as he sits in the draughty, unheated scriptorium, as he walks through the freezing open-air cloister. His clothing is not a fashion statement. It is a carefully engineered survival suit, and it is a uniform. Every other monk in the dormitory is wearing the exact same set of garments. This uniformity is a powerful symbol of the communal and the egalitarian nature of the monastic life. There is no distinction of rank or of wealth in the dormitory. All are equal in their simple, woolen habits, and all are equal in their shared, nightly struggle against the cold. Let your mind feel the deep, comforting, and slightly heavy weight of these multiple layers of wool. Imagine the sensation of being swaddled, of being protected, of being enclosed in your own personal and portable cocoon of warmth. It is a feeling of a deep, secure, and slightly claustrophobic safety. Dreams in the cold. Sleep for the medieval monk is not a single, unbroken stretch of peaceful oblivion. It is a fragmented and often an uneasy state, a journey through different levels of consciousness, punctuated by the cold, the discomfort, and the ever-present sound of the bell. And in this shallow, fitful sleep, the mind is free to wander into the strange and often unsettling landscape of dreams. Let us lie beside the sleeping monk in the deep, cold darkness of the dormitory. His body is still, his breathing is slow and regular, but his mind is far from still. It is in the world of dreams, a world that the medieval mind understood not as a product of the subconscious, but as a real and a significant place, a space where the soul could be visited by angels tempted by demons, or given a prophetic vision of the future. The dreams of the monk are shaped by the two great opposing forces of his life, the cold, hard, and disciplined reality of his physical world, and the rich, vibrant, and intensely emotional reality of his spiritual world. He might dream of warmth. In his sleep, he might find himself back in his childhood home, sitting by a great roaring fire, the comforting, forgotten feeling of a deep, radiant warmth on his skin. He might dream of a summer's day, of lying in a field of warm, dry grass, the sun on his face. These dreams are a form of wish fulfillment, the mind's desperate, imaginative attempt to create the comfort that the body is so profoundly denied. He will wake from such a dream with a sense of a deep and a poignant loss, the memory of the warmth making the reality of the cold dormitory feel even more brutal. He will also dream of the stories, the images, and the figures that populate his waking spiritual life. He has spent his day reading the lives of the saints, chanting the Psalms, and meditating on the passion of Christ. And at night, these powerful images and narratives will continue their life in his dreams. He might dream that he is one of the martyrs enduring a terrible but a glorious torment for his faith. He might dream that he is visited by an angel or by the Virgin Mary, who offers him a word of comfort or a vision of the celestial paradise that awaits the faithful. These dreams are a source of great spiritual consolation, a confirmation that his hard, ascetic life is a meaningful and a worthy one. But the dream world is also a place of great spiritual danger. The devil and his demons were believed to be particularly active at night, when the soul was in the vulnerable, unguarded state of sleep. A monk might be plagued by terrifying nightmares, dreams in which he is tempted by visions of forbidden pleasures, or in which he is tormented by grotesque demonic creatures in a fiery, sulphurous hellscape. To wake from such a dream is a terrifying experience. The monk will be drenched in a cold sweat, his heart pounding, the vivid, horrifying images of the dream still burned into his mind. Is this just a dream, or was it a genuine spiritual assault, a vision of the fate that awaits his sinful soul? He will likely seek out his confessor in the morning to unburden his mind of the terrifying images and to seek reassurance and spiritual guidance. And so the monk's sleep is an uneasy and a deeply significant affair. It is not just a period of physical rest, it is a time of spiritual trial, of imaginative escape, of divine visitation, and of demonic assault. His dreams are not meaningless static. They are an important part of his spiritual journey, a nightly drama that is as real and as important as the rituals and the labors of his waking day. Let your mind drift into this world of cold, uneasy, and deeply meaningful dreams. Imagine the feeling of a profound and a longed-for warmth. See the beautiful and the terrifying visions of the spiritual world. It is a world where the boundary between the mind and the soul, between the real and the imagined, is a thin and a shimmering veil. Part 4. Discipline and Devotion. The Lesson of Hardship. We have seen in detail the profound and unrelenting physical hardship of the monk's nightly struggle against the cold. But to understand the medieval monastic mind, we must understand that this hardship was not seen as a meaningless or an accidental byproduct of their life. It was, in fact, central to their entire spiritual project. The cold was not just a trial to be endured, it was a lesson to be learned, a tool to be used, a path to be followed. For the modern mind, which is so deeply conditioned to seek comfort and to avoid pain, this is a difficult concept to grasp. But for the monk, his entire life was a conscious and a deliberate effort to reverse the priorities of the fallen, worldly life. The world seeks pleasure, so the monk must seek penance. The world seeks comfort, so the monk must embrace hardship. The world seeks to satisfy the desires of the body, so the monk must seek to subdue them, to mortify the flesh, in order to liberate the soul. The cold of the dormitory was one of the most powerful and the most constant of these tools of mortification. It was a form of asceticism that was not chosen, but was built into the very fabric of the monastic life. And it taught a series of profound and deeply held spiritual lessons. The first lesson was one of humility. The cold was a great leveler. It did not matter if a monk came from a noble family or a poor one. In the freezing darkness of the dormitory, all were equally cold, equally vulnerable, equally dependent on the simple, shared warmth of their woolen habits and their collective breath. The cold stripped away the outer layers of social status and revealed the fundamental, shared and fragile humanity that lay beneath. It was a constant reminder that in the eyes of God and in the face of the great, impersonal forces of nature, all men are equal. The second lesson was one of discipline. To endure the cold, night after night, year after year, without complaint, required a tremendous act of will. It was a training ground for the soul. The monk learned to control his body's instinctive animal desire for warmth and comfort. He learned to subordinate his own personal physical feelings to the higher demands of the monastic rule and the will of God. This training in physical endurance was believed to build a spiritual fortitude, a strength of will that could then be applied to the more subtle and more dangerous spiritual battles against the temptations of pride, of lust, and of despair. The third, and perhaps the most important lesson, was one of empathy and of remembrance. The monk's own personal and relatively minor suffering from the cold was seen as a way to connect with the much greater sufferings of others. As he lay shivering in his bed, he was encouraged to meditate on the sufferings of the poor, who had no thick stone walls to protect them from the winter winds. He was taught to think of the sufferings of the martyrs who had endured terrible tortures for their faith. And above all, he was taught to meditate on the sufferings of Christ. He was to remember Christ homeless and with nowhere to lay his head. He was to remember Christ stripped of his garments and exposed to the cold on the cross. The monk's own personal, nightly experience of the cold was a small, physical, and deeply intimate way of participating in the passion of his Saviour. His suffering was not meaningless. It was a form of prayer, a way of drawing closer to the great central mystery of his faith. And so the cold of the monastery was not a design flaw. It was a feature. It was a deliberate and a powerful part of the spiritual technology of the monastic life. It was a tool for shaping the soul, for building character, and for fostering a deep and a compassionate sense of connection to the great, universal and redemptive story of human suffering. Let your mind rest on this profound and perhaps a deeply alien idea. Imagine a world where hardship is not something to be avoided, but something to be embraced, something to be learned from, something to be transformed into a source of spiritual strength. Monks of the North Bay. The rule of Saint Benedict, which laid down the foundational principles of Western monasticism, was written in the 6th century in the relatively mild climate of central Italy. But as the monastic movement spread north to the colder, damper, and far more brutal climates of France, of Germany, of England, and of Scandinavia, a rigid and a literal adherence to the Italian-born rule became not just a hardship, but a life-threatening impossibility. And so the monks of the north, with their characteristic practical ingenuity, began to adapt. Let us visit a monastery on the wind-swept coast of Northumbria in the deep midwinter. The wind howls in from the grey, icy sea, carrying with it a driving, sleeting rain. The temperature is hovering just above freezing. To survive in such a place, the simple Italian model of the monastery has had to evolve. The architecture itself is different. The walls are thicker, the windows are smaller, and are often, by this later period, glazed with small, thick panes of horn or of crude, bubbly glass to keep out the wind. The dormitory is still unheated, but its roof is likely to be lower to create a smaller, more easily warmed volume of air. The clothing of the monks has also been adapted. The simple, single-layered habit of the south is not enough. The records of these northern monasteries are filled with references to the provision of extra, warmer garments. The monks are issued with tunics lined with thick, warm sheepskin. They are given woolen stockings and sometimes even woolen breeches to be worn under their habits. They have mittens to protect their hands from the cold as they work, and heavy, felt-lined boots for their feet. The use of furs is common. While the stricter orders might frown on the use of luxurious furs like ermine or sable, the practical use of the skins of common animals like sheep, goats, or even cats is a widely accepted necessity. A fur-lined cloak, a fur-lined hood, these are the essential tools of survival. And even the strict prohibition against fires in the dormitory is, in some of the most extreme northern climates, occasionally relaxed. While a permanent hearth is still seen as a danger and a luxury, a temporary source of heat might be provided during the very coldest nights of the winter. A metal brazier filled with glowing hot coals from the kitchen fire might be brought into the dormitory for a few hours in the evening to take the raw, killing edge off the cold before the monks go to sleep. Another ingenious adaptation is the use of heated stones. Large, flat flagstones would be heated in the kitchen fire and then wrapped in thick cloth. A monk might be given one of these warming stones to take to his bed, a small, personal, and long-lasting source of radiant heat that he could hold against his body or place at his feet, a simple and a deeply comforting medieval hot water bottle. And the diet, too, is different. The light, vegetable-based diet of the Mediterranean is supplemented with the heartier, more fat-rich foods of the north. The monks eat more meat, more fish, more cheese, and they drink a stronger, more calorie-rich ale. Their bodies need the extra fuel to generate the internal heat required to fight the external cold. These adaptations are not seen as a betrayal of the monastic ideal. They are a practical and a necessary compromise, a recognition that the spirit, in order to thrive, needs the body to, at the very least, survive. The great abbots and the reformers of the Northern Church understood that there was no spiritual merit in freezing to death, and so the monks of the North create a new and a hardier form of monasticism. Their lives are still incredibly difficult, their nights still brutally cold, but they have learned through generations of hard-won experience how to adapt, how to endure, and how to create a small and a viable pocket of ordered spiritual life in the very heart of the cold, wild, and untamed northern wilderness. Let your mind feel the deep, penetrating, and damp cold of this northern monastery. Hear the lonely, howling sound of the wind coming in from the sea, and feel the small, deep, and incredibly precious comfort of a single, warm stone held against the body in the deep, cold darkness of the night. Sleep as sacrifice. In the disciplined and deeply symbolic world of the monastery, nothing is without its spiritual meaning, and so the simple biological necessity of sleep is transformed from a mere physical act into a complex and a profound spiritual exercise. Sleep is not a right, it is a gift from God, and like all gifts, it is to be used wisely, to be offered back to the giver, and to be understood as a form of sacrifice. Let us consider the very quantity of sleep that a monk is allowed. The monastic day is a long and a grueling one, beginning before dawn and ending long after dusk. The time allotted for sleep is short, and it is deliberately and ritually fragmented. The great unbroken 8-hour sleep of the modern world is an unimaginable luxury. The monk's primary period of rest is the few hours between the end of compline at around 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening and the ringing of the bell for the midnight vigil at around 2 in the morning. This is the first sleep, and it is the deepest and the most precious. After the long, cold 2 or 3 hour service of the night offices, he is allowed a second sleep, a short, fitful period of rest in the hour or two before the first light of dawn calls him to the service of lords. The total amount of sleep a monk gets in a 24-hour period is often no more than 5 or 6 hours, and it is always broken into these two unequal parts. This deliberate chronic sleep deprivation is a powerful ascetic tool. It keeps the body in a permanent state of mild exhaustion, a state that is believed to dampen the passions and to make the mind more receptive to the spiritual world. A well-rested, energetic body is seen as a potential source of pride and of sinful temptation. A tired body is a humbled body. The quality of the sleep is also a form of sacrifice. As we have seen, the monk's bed is deliberately uncomfortable, his dormitory is deliberately cold, his sleep is constantly disturbed by the snoring and the restlessness of his brothers. The deep, luxurious, and self-indulgent sleep of the secular world is a temptation to be resisted. The monk's sleep is meant to be a light, watchful, and uneasy state, a sleep from which he can be easily roused, a sleep that is always ready to be sacrificed at the sound of the bell. The very act of waking up is a spiritual discipline. To be torn from the warmth and the oblivion of sleep by the loud, commanding toll of the midnight bell is a small, daily act of death to the self. It is a victory of the will over the body's desires. The monk who rises instantly, without grumbling, without a moment's hesitation, is performing a powerful act of obedience, an offering of his own personal comfort on the altar of the community's sacred duty. And so, sleep itself becomes a form of prayer. Before he closes his eyes, the monk makes the sign of the cross and commends his soul to God, acknowledging that his life is in God's hands, that he may not wake in the morning. His sleep is an act of trust, of surrender, and the moments of wakefulness in the middle of the night, when the rest of the world is asleep, are seen as a precious and a powerful time. He is a watchman, a spiritual sentry, standing guard over a sleeping world, his prayers a shield against the forces of darkness. His sacrifice of sleep is a vicarious act performed on behalf of the whole of sinful, sleeping humanity. This is a profound and a deeply challenging reimagining of the nature of rest. It is a world where sleep is not an escape from life, but an integral and a deeply meaningful part of the spiritual journey. It is a sacrifice, an offering, a prayer, a battle, a constant and a powerful reminder that every moment of a monk's life, whether waking or sleeping, belongs not to himself, but to God. Let your mind rest on this idea of sleep as a gift, as a trust, as a sacred and a precious thing. Feel a sense of gratitude for the deep, unbroken, and comfortable sleep that is available to you. The Night Watcher. In the deep, dark, and sleeping heart of the monastery, one man is often awake when all the others are at rest. He is the Night Watcher, the circuiter, a figure of quiet authority and of silent, vigilant care. His role is a lonely, a cold, and an absolutely essential one. He is the guardian of the monastery's discipline and the protector of its fragile, sleeping soul. The circuiter is usually one of the senior and most trusted monks of the community, appointed to this task by the abbot. His watch begins after the last notes of Compline have faded, and it will not end until the first bell for matins rings in the deep cold of the pre-dawn hours. He does not sleep. While his brothers are in their beds, he is on his feet, making his slow, silent, and methodical rounds through the darkened, sleeping abbey. He carries a single, hooded lantern, its light carefully shielded so that it casts only a small, dim pool of light at his feet, enough for him to see his way, but not enough to disturb the sleepers. His first and most important duty is to patrol the dormitory. He walks, his feet clad in soft, silent, felt-soled shoes, down the long central aisle between the two rows of sleeping monks. He is a silent, shadowy, and almost ghostly figure, his presence a constant and a watchful reminder of the rules. He is listening for the sounds of the night. Is a monk talking in his sleep, revealing some hidden, troubled secret of his soul? Is a monk weeping, a sign of a deep, spiritual distress that may need the abbot's counsel in the morning? Is a monk missing from his bed a sign of a potential and a serious breach of the monastic rule. He's also watching. He ensures that the monks are sleeping in their proper attire, in their proper posture. He makes sure that the single, mandatory lamp is still burning, its flame a steady and a safe one. He is the guardian of the great silence and the protector of the dormitory's ordered peace. His rounds then take him to the other parts of the sleeping monastery. He walks the cold, echoing and profoundly empty cloister, his small lantern casting a moving, dancing shadow on the great stone arches. He is checking that all is secure, that the doors are locked, that there is no sign of fire. He will visit the church, a vast, dark and awe-inspiring space at this hour. He will kneel for a moment before the main altar, where the sanctuary lamp, a symbol of the real presence of Christ, burns with a single, small, and eternal red flame. He will say a quiet, personal prayer, a moment of communion in the deep, sacred silence. The circuitor's vigil is a long, a cold, and a deeply lonely one. He is surrounded by his sleeping brothers, but he is set apart from them by his wakefulness. He is a shepherd, watching over his flock through the long, dark and dangerous hours of the night. His role is a practical one, certainly. He is a watchman, a fire marshal, a disciplinarian, but his role is also a deeply symbolic one. He is the living embodiment of the monastic ideal of vigilance. While the world sleeps, the monastery must be awake, must be at prayer. And the circuitor, in his silent, solitary and sleepless patrol, is the focal point of that sacred and that nightly watch. He is the keeper of the flame, the guardian of the silence, the quiet beating heart of the monastery at night. His slow, steady and repetitive footsteps, echoing softly in the cold stone corridors, are a sound of a deep and a reassuring order. They are a sign that all is well, that the community is safe, that the discipline is being held, and that the long, cold night is being passed in a state of a profound and a watchful peace. Let the image of the silent, watchful circuitor, making his slow, steady rounds with his small, hooded lantern, bring a deep sense of safety and of security to your own mind. There is a guardian, there is a watcher. The night is not a time of chaos, but of a deep and a protected order. Part 5. What Remains in Memory. Dawn in the Cloister. The long, cold and arduous night is finally beginning to release its grip. The first, faint, and almost imperceptible hint of light is appearing in the eastern sky, a subtle, pearly grey that begins to dilute the deep, inky blackness of the night. And with this first, tentative light, comes the sound that signals the end of the nightly ordeal and the beginning of a new day. The sound of the bell for Lauds, the dawn prayer. Let us find ourselves in the cloister as the monks make their way from the church, their first prayers of the day now finished, back to their daily labours. The world is being reborn in the soft, cool and pristine light of a new morning. The cloister, which was a place of deep, impenetrable shadows during the night, is now filled with a gentle, indirect, and beautifully clear light. The great stone arches are no longer menacing, but are revealed in all their simple, graceful, and powerful beauty. The flagstones underfoot are slick with a thin, shimmering layer of morning dew, or perhaps a delicate, crystalline lacework of frost. Each stone seems to be outlined in silver. The air is incredibly cold, but it is a different kind of cold from the stagnant, dead cold of the dormitory. It is a clean, crisp and invigorating cold, filled with the fresh, damp and earthy smells of the new day. The monks who have spent the last few hours in the deep, bone-chilling cold of the unlit church now feel the first, faint, and almost imperceptible promise of the coming sun. They are still in the great silence, but the atmosphere has changed. The tense, watchful silence of the night has been replaced by a more peaceful, and a more purposeful quiet. The monks move with a new energy, their bodies stiff and sore from the cold and the hard beds, but their spirits renewed by the prayers and by the simple, profound and deeply welcome miracle of the new day. In the central garth, the small enclosed garden at the heart of the cloister, the first signs of life are stirring. The leaves of the herbs and the flowers are heavy with dew, each drop a tiny, perfect and light-capturing jewel. A small bird, a robin or a wren, begins its morning song, its clear, liquid notes a startling and a beautiful intrusion into the monastic silence. The monks are on their way to their appointed tasks. The scribes will be heading to the scriptorium, their first task of the day, to try and thaw the ink in their inkwells, which has likely frozen solid during the night. The gardeners will be heading out to the kitchen garden, their tools in hand. The bakers will be on their way to the bakehouse to light the great oven that will bake the community's daily bread. The monastery, which has been a quiet, sleeping and inward-looking place during the night, is now turning its face to the outside world again. It is becoming a place of work, of production, of a quiet and a well-ordered industry. The dawn is a powerful and a daily symbol of the resurrection. It is a victory of light over darkness, of warmth over cold, of life over the small nightly death of sleep. For the monk who has endured the long, cold and often fearful ordeal of the night, the arrival of the dawn is not just a beautiful sight, it is a profound and a deeply felt theological event. It is a sign of God's grace, a renewal of his covenant with the world, a promise of the ultimate and the final victory over the darkness of sin and of death. Let your mind be filled with the cool, clean, and hopeful light of this new monastic morning. See the silver light on the frost-covered stones. Hear the first clear and beautiful notes of the birdsong. Feel the deep, quiet and hopeful peace that comes with the end of a long and a difficult night. The ordeal is over. The struggle has been won. A new day with all its grace and all its possibility has begun. The endurance of silence. The sun is higher in the sky now, its light streaming through the cloister arches, creating long, beautiful patterns of light and shadow on the stone floor. The monks are at their work, their silent, purposeful movements a testament to the deep, ingrained discipline of their lives. The great communal ordeal of the cold night is over, and yet it is never spoken of. This is one of the most profound and perhaps one of the most difficult aspects of the monastic life for the modern mind to comprehend. The immense, shared and nightly suffering of the cold is a central and a defining experience of every monk's life. And yet, it is an experience that is wrapped in a profound and an almost absolute silence. There is no time in the monastic day for the sharing of personal feelings, for the complaining about physical discomforts. The rule of Saint Benedict explicitly forbids murmuring, the quiet grumbling and complaining that can be so corrosive to the spirit of a community. To complain about the cold would be a sign of a weak will, of a lack of spiritual fortitude, of a soul that is still too attached to the comforts of the body. And so the hardship is endured in a profound and a deeply personal silence. The monk may confess his spiritual struggles to his abbot, his feelings of despair or of a lack of faith, but he will not speak of the simple physical misery of being cold. It is a given, a constant, a part of the very air he breathes. To speak of it would be as strange as speaking of the hardness of the stone or the wetness of the rain. This endurance of silence is a powerful and a deeply shaping force. It fosters a culture of immense, stoic, and uncomplaining resilience. The monks learn, from the first day they enter the monastery, that their own personal, physical feelings are of little importance. The needs of the community, the demands of the rule, the glory of God, these are the things that matter. The self, with its chorus of aches and pains and desires, is to be silenced. This does not mean that the monks do not feel the cold. They feel it intensely. But they have learned to hold that feeling, to contain it, to transform it from a mere physical sensation into a spiritual exercise. They have learned to live with a level of physical discomfort that would be, for most of us, completely unbearable. And this shared, unspoken experience creates a deep and a powerful bond between them. They do not need to speak of the cold. They all know it. They can see it in the pinched blue look of each other's faces on a winter morning. They can hear it in the slight chattering of each other's teeth as they stand in the unheated church. Their shared suffering is a silent and a powerful form of communication, a bond that is deeper and more profound than any that could be forged by words. And so the great central drama of their nightly survival is a silent one. It is a story that is written not in the chronicles of the monastery, but in the lines of hardship on the monks' faces, in the gnarled arthritic joints of the older monks, in the deep, quiet, and almost unbreakable resilience of their spirits. Let your mind rest in this profound and this powerful silence. Imagine a world where the greatest of all shared hardships is never spoken of, but is simply, quietly, and collectively endured. It is a world of an almost unimaginable inner strength, of a deep and a profound commitment to a reality that is beyond the mere comforts of the body, the rhythm of centuries. Let us now pull back, far back, from the single specific night of a single specific monk. Let us feel the great, slow, and majestic passage of time. The sun rises and sets, the seasons turn, the years, the decades, the centuries roll by. And through it all, the fundamental and the deeply cold rhythm of the monastic night remains almost completely unchanged. The monastery we have been visiting is not a place that exists in a single, static moment in time. It is a living, evolving institution, a great stone ship that is sailing through the deep and the often stormy waters of history. The world outside its walls is in a constant state of flux. Kings and kingdoms rise and fall. Great plagues sweep across the land. New ideas, new technologies, new ways of understanding the world are born. But inside the monastery walls, the rhythm of life is a slow, a deep, and a profoundly conservative one. The bell that calls the monks to the midnight vigil in the 14th century is the same bell in the same tower that called their predecessors in the 11th century. The psalms they chant in the cold, dark church are the same psalms, sung to the same ancient and hauntingly beautiful melodies. The hard, straw-filled pallet, the single, scratchy woolen blanket, the profound and the bone-chilling cold of the unheated dormitory. These are the constants, the great, unchanging realities of the monastic life passed down from one generation to the next. A young novice, shivering in his bed in the year 1350, is enduring the exact same physical and spiritual trial as the novice who lay in that very same spot in the year 1050. He is part of a great, long and unbroken chain of endurance, a silent, spiritual relay race against the cold and the darkness, a race in which the baton of faith and of discipline is passed from one generation to the next. This profound continuity is a source of immense strength and of meaning. To be a monk is to be a part of something that is much larger and much more permanent than one's own small and transient life. It is to know that you are walking a path that has been trodden by thousands of holy men before you, and that will be trodden by thousands more after you are gone. The cold that you feel is the same cold that the great saints of your order felt. Your own personal and nightly struggle is a small but a meaningful participation in a great and a timeless spiritual enterprise. The monastery itself becomes a physical record of this long, slow rhythm of the centuries. The flagstones of the cloister are worn down into shallow, concave depressions by the slow, shuffling footsteps of 100 generations of monks. The wooden choir stalls in the church are polished to a dark, deep sheen by the constant touch of their hands and the rubbing of their woolen habits. The monastery is a great, slow and patient clock, measuring time not in hours and in minutes, but in lifetimes and in centuries. It is an anchor of stability, of continuity, and of memory in a world that is often chaotic, violent, and forgetful. And the cold is the great, unchanging, and ever-present constant in this long, slow story. It is the adversary, the teacher, the discipline, the one physical reality that binds the monk of the late Middle Ages to his earliest and most ascetic spiritual ancestors. It is the thread that runs unbroken through the very heart of the monastic experience for 1,000 years. Let your mind float on this great, slow, and majestic river of time. Feel the deep and the profoundly calming rhythm of the centuries. The small, individual struggles and sufferings are absorbed into this great and a timeless pattern. There is a deep and a powerful peace in this long perspective, a sense of an order that is vast, that is enduring, and that is eternal. Lessons for the present. Our journey through the long, cold, and silent nights of the medieval monastery is now at an end. We have left the cold stones, the flickering lamps, and the quiet, enduring figures of the monks behind us. We are returning to our own modern world, a world of soft beds, of central heating, and of a deep and an almost unconscious expectation of physical comfort. And it is from this position of immense and of almost unimaginable luxury that we can, perhaps, draw a few quiet and final lessons from the world we have just visited. The story of the medieval monk and his struggle against the cold is not just a quaint historical curiosity. It is a powerful and a deeply moving testament to the incredible resilience and the profound adaptability of the human body and the human spirit. It is a reminder that the human being is capable of enduring and of finding meaning in a level of physical hardship that our modern, comfort-oriented culture has almost completely forgotten. The monk's life teaches us that our obsession with physical comfort may, in fact, come at a spiritual price. The constant and the often unconscious pursuit of a perfectly temperature-controlled, a perfectly soft, and a perfectly effortless existence can lead to a kind of spiritual softness, a lack of resilience, a deep and an unacknowledged fear of any form of physical hardship. The monk, in his deliberate embrace of the cold, was engaged in a powerful and a lifelong project of building his own inner spiritual fortitude. He was a spiritual athlete, and the cold was his training ground. His story also reveals a profound and a deeply counterintuitive truth that survival is as much a spiritual and a communal act as it is a physical one. The monk did not survive the cold because he had a better blanket or a thicker wall. He survived because he had a powerful and a deeply sustaining framework of meaning for his suffering. His hardship was not a random, meaningless affliction. It was a spiritual discipline, a form of prayer, a way of connecting with his God. This powerful narrative structure is what allowed him to endure what would, for a person without it, be an unbearable and a soul-crushing ordeal. And he did not survive alone. He survived as part of a community. The shared warmth of the dormitory, the shared silence, the shared ritual, the shared unspoken understanding of their collective struggle. These were the invisible and the powerful bonds that held him and his world together. His survival was a collective and a communal achievement. And so as we lie in our own warm and comfortable beds, we can perhaps take a moment to reflect on the quiet and the profound lessons of the cold stone cloisters. We can feel a sense of a deep and a humble gratitude for the simple and the often overlooked gift of physical warmth. We can feel a sense of a profound respect for the incredible and the almost unimaginable resilience of our own human ancestors. And we can perhaps be inspired to find in our own lives a small measure of the monk's spiritual fortitude, his quiet, uncomplaining endurance, and his deep and his abiding sense of a purpose that is greater than his own personal and physical comfort. The story of the medieval monastery at night is a story of a world that is, in many ways, profoundly alien to our own. But it is also a story that speaks to the most timeless and the most universal of human themes: the struggle between the body and the spirit, between the individual and the community, between the profound human longing for comfort and the equally profound human capacity to endure, to find meaning, and to transcend the very hardest of all imaginable hardships. Let the deep, quiet, and profoundly disciplined peace of the monastery be your final and your lasting impression. The long, cold night has been endured. The dawn has come. The spirit has, once again, triumphed over the frailties of the flesh. And now, in the warmth, the comfort, and the profound and the unearned peace of your own modern night, you can let go and you can rest. Part 6. The last candle burns the empty cup. The last of the rowdy patrons have been ejected. The final angry shouts have faded into the cold night air, leaving a profound and deeply welcome silence in their wake. The long, chaotic, and exhausting night is finally over. The tavern is closing, its great oak door barred against the world, and the common room begins a slow transformation from a public stage back into a private space. Let us remain in the room and observe the quiet, almost ritualistic process of the tavern shutting down. The scene is one of a battlefield in the aftermath of a great, festive war. The air is still thick and hazy with the day's accumulation of wood smoke, but it is a cool, stale smoke now, the central fire having burned down to a deep bed of glowing embers. The vibrant, living atmosphere of just an hour ago has evaporated, leaving behind a sense of weary emptiness. The tables are a landscape of devastation, littered with the detritus of the night's revelry. Dozens of wooden mugs lie on their sides, some overturned, their last dregs of ale forming dark, sticky pools on the scarred and stained wood of the trestle tops. There are the hard crusts of bread that served as trenchers, gnawed bones from the perpetual stew, the scattered shells of nuts, and the occasional lost or forgotten copper coin from a hastily concluded dice game. The floor is a chaotic mess of trampled straw of mud tracked in from the street of spilled ale that has turned the rushes dark and damp, and of the grim scattered evidence of the night's brawls: an overturned stool with a broken leg, a discarded and blood-stained rag. This is the unglamorous aftermath of manufactured joy. The alewife, her face a mask of profound, bone-deep weariness, surveys the scene from behind her counter. This is the quiet, unglamorous reality of her profession, a reality unseen by the patrons who have stumbled out into the night. For every moment of laughter and song that filled her coffers, there is this moment of silent, solitary, and exhausting clean-up. She moves with a slow, practiced efficiency, her body aching from a long day and night spent on her feet. She and her young potboy, a lad who has been dozing in a corner, begin the slow, methodical process of restoring a semblance of order. They move through the room, collecting the empty cups. The sound is a soft, rhythmic clatter as the wooden mugs are gathered, their hollow sound a stark contrast to the full, celebratory clanking of a few hours earlier. They are stacked on the counter, a wooden monument to the night's consumption. Each empty cup is a small, silent testament to a moment of pleasure, of conversation, of boisterous escape that has now passed into memory. Each one represents a coin in the alewife's purse, the tangible, hard-won profit of the long, hard night. The potboy takes a great rough besom made of bundled twigs and begins to sweep the floor. He does not sweep with the delicate precision of a housemaid. His motions are broad and forceful, gathering the dirty, ale-soaked rushes with all their accumulated filth into a great pile near the door, ready to be shoveled out into the street in the morning, to be trodden into the mud by the carts and the animals. While the boy works, the alewife sits at a table, a single sputtering tallow candle providing the only light in the vast, shadowy room. She unties her leather purse and tips its contents, along with the coins from the wooden till, onto the table. The small pile of currency is a motley and a meagre-looking collection, a few valuable and surprisingly heavy silver pennies, but mostly a clutter of small, crude, and almost worthless copper and lead tokens, the local currency of the common folk. She begins to count them, her lips moving silently, her mind a quick, practical abacus, calculating her profits against her expenses, the cost of the barley, the price of the meat, the small wage she will pay the potboy. This is the quiet, lonely, and anxious heart of her business. The room, as it is slowly cleared and tidied, begins to feel different. It is no longer a public stage for the sprawling, chaotic drama of the community. It is being reclaimed, transformed back into a private space, a home. The vibrant, chaotic, and almost manic energy of the tavern has seeped out of it, leaving behind a quiet, empty, and slightly melancholy shell, a space that seems to be holding its breath. The empty cup, lying on its side on the table before being collected, is the perfect symbol of this moment. It is a vessel that was, just a short while ago, full of a life-giving, intoxicating, and transformative substance. Now it is empty, its purpose fulfilled for the night, waiting to be refilled on another day, for another crowd. The tavern itself is like this cup. Its purpose is done. It is now empty, quiet, and at rest, gathering its strength for the inevitable return of the noise and the chaos with the next setting sun. Let your mind rest in the deep, satisfying, and slightly sad quiet of the empty, closing tavern. The embers fade. The common room is now as clean as it is ever going to be. The empty cups are stacked. The sticky tables have been wiped with a damp grey rag, and the filth-laden rushes have been piled by the door. The alewife's long day of labour is almost done. Now she turns her attention to the very heart of the room, to the great dying fire in the central hearth. This is the final, and perhaps the most important, ritual of the night. The roaring, leaping, and almost violent blaze that was the centre of the tavern's life, its sun, its source of all energy and comfort, is gone. All that remains is a deep, vast, and gently pulsing bed of red and orange embers. The great logs that had burned so fiercely have been consumed, their solid, woody forms transformed by the fire into a fragile, incandescent, and ghostly memory of themselves. The embers glow with a life of their own, a slow, deep, and rhythmic breathing of light. The heat that radiates from this bed of embers is a different kind of heat from the fierce, direct, and often scorching heat of the open flames. It is a soft, gentle, and deeply penetrating warmth that fills the now quiet room with a profound sense of peace, of safety, and of a day's energy slowly, gracefully coming to its end. The shadows on the walls are no longer the wild, dancing, and often menacing shadows of the firelight. They are deep, soft, still, and reassuring. The alewife takes a long iron poker, its end glowing a faint red from the heat, and she begins to tend to the dying fire. Her movements are slow, practiced, and filled with a kind of reverence. Her goal is not to extinguish the embers completely. That would be a foolish and a wasteful act. Her goal is to preserve them, to keep the precious living heart of the fire safe through the long, cold hours of the night. She uses the poker to gently, skillfully push the glowing coals together, away from the edges of the hearth and into a tight, compact mound in the very center. She is gathering the last of the warmth, concentrating it, protecting it. Then she takes a small iron shovel and begins to cover this glowing mound with a thick, heavy blanket of the fine grey ash that has accumulated at the sides of the fireplace. This is the ancient and the essential practice of banking the fire. The thick layer of ash will insulate the embers, starving them of the oxygen they need to burn fiercely, forcing them into a state of slow, smouldering hibernation. They will not burn themselves out completely during the night. They will smoulder slowly, safely, and almost invisibly in their warm grey bed of ash, a small, precious, and carefully guarded core of living heat, preserved through the long, cold, and dark hours until dawn. In the morning, when she returns to the cold and silent common room, all she will have to do is to take her poker and carefully rake away the top layer of ash. Beneath, she will find the embers still glowing a faint but a definite red. She can then add some small, dry, and easily combustible kindling, a handful of wood shavings, a piece of dried moss, and blow on the embers gently with a pair of leather bellows. The embers will spring back to life, the kindling will catch, and the fire, the heart of her tavern, will be reborn, ready to warm and to welcome the customers of a new day. This nightly ritual of banking the fire is a powerful, a practical, and a deeply ancient act. In a world without matches, without lighters, without any easy or reliable way to create a flame from scratch, the preservation of an existing fire is a sacred and an essential daily task. To let the fire go out completely through carelessness or neglect is a small disaster, a sign of a poorly run household, a surrender to the cold and the dark. The stray dog sleeps. The tavern is now almost completely dark and utterly silent. The alewife has bolted the door and has retired to her own small private chamber above the common room. The fire is a dead-looking mound of grey ash, its living heart safely buried within. But in the deep, profound stillness of the room there is one last, living, breathing presence. Curled up on the warm flagstones in front of the hearth, in the one spot in the entire building where the fire's heat lingers the longest, a stray dog is sleeping. He is a creature of the tavern, a permanent, if unofficial, resident of the establishment. He is a scruffy, wiry, and resourceful mongrel, his coat a patchy and a nondescript map of different colours, his ears torn and notched from a dozen old fights. He has no master, no name other than the simple, generic title of dog. He belongs to no single person, and so in a strange and a practical way, he belongs to the tavern itself, to the community as a whole. During the long, chaotic hours of the evening, he is a scavenger, a beggar, and a master of the art of opportunism. He patrols the floor of the common room, a silent, four-legged ghost, his keen nose twitching, constantly on the scent of any dropped morsel of food, a crust of bread, a piece of gristle, a gnawed bone. He has learned, through long and careful observation, which of the patrons are likely to give him a surreptitious scratch behind the ears, and which are likely to aim a drunken kick in his direction. He has mastered the complex social geography of the tavern, and he navigates it with a quiet, an unassuming, and a deeply patient skill. He is a silent, and a largely unnoticed observer of the human drama that unfolds here every night. But now at night, his long day's work is done. He has found the best, the warmest, the safest, and the most comfortable spot in the entire building, and he has claimed it for his own with the simple, unquestioned authority of long-established custom. He is curled into a tight, perfect, and deeply defensive circle, his nose tucked into the base of his tail, a posture of absolute, unassailable, and deeply peaceful repose. His sleep is deep, untroubled, and profound. His scruffy side rises and falls with the slow, steady, and almost inaudible rhythm of his breathing. Occasionally, his legs will twitch, his paws will paddle at the air, and a low, soft whimper or a muffled woof will escape his throat. He is dreaming, his canine mind replaying the excitements and the anxieties of his day. He is dreaming, perhaps, of chasing a rabbit in a field, a distant ancestral memory, or more likely of the savoury, fat-dripping and deeply satisfying bone that a kind and a drunken customer gave him earlier in the evening. He is a creature of pure, uncomplicated and deeply enviable instinct. He is not troubled by the sins of his past or by the anxieties of his future. His world at this moment is one of the simple, immediate and overwhelmingly pleasant realities of warmth, of shelter, of a full belly, and of a deep, dreamless security. His very presence in the tavern is a small but a significant sign of its rough, but its genuine compassion. In a world that is often brutal, unforgiving, and intensely practical, this small, smoky room has made a permanent, if an unofficial space for a creature that has no real economic value, no purpose, other than simply to exist. The dog is a part of the tavern's untidy and its unofficial family. He is also a silent and an effective guardian. If a stranger were to try and break into the tavern in the dead of night, his deep, rumbling growl, born from a territorial instinct as old as his species, would be the first and the most effective alarm. He is a symbol of the tavern itself. A mongrel of no particular breeding, a survivor, tough, resilient, and resourceful, with a deep abiding and instinctual appreciation for the simple, profound, and essential comforts of a warm fire and a safe place to sleep. Let your mind rest on the quiet, still, and deeply peaceful image of this sleeping dog. The tavern shutters close. The final act of the long, wearying day is at hand. The alewife, having banked the fire, counted her meagre coins and ensured that her small, unofficial family of the potboy and the stray dog are settled for the night. Moves through the dark and silent common room, performing the last essential rituals of closing. Her movements are slow. Her body aches with a deep exhaustion, but her actions are filled with a sense of a deep, familiar, and almost sacred purpose. This is the nightly ritual of making safe. She moves first to the single small and unglazed window of the common room. It is a simple, rectangular opening in the wattle and daub wall, a gaping hole that during the day lets in a small amount of light and a great deal of the smells and the sounds of the street. At night, it must be sealed. She swings the heavy, solid, and iron-strapped wooden shutter into place, its movement a soft, scraping sound in the profound quiet. She then lifts a thick, heavy wooden bar and lowers it into the two great U-shaped iron brackets on the inside of the wall. The sound of the bar dropping into place is a deep, solid, and deeply reassuring thud. The outside world, with all its unpredictable dangers, its cold mists, and its deep, unlit darkness, is now securely locked out on this front. Then she moves to the great oak door, the main portal through which all the life, the energy, and the chaos of the evening has flowed. This is the tavern's most vulnerable point, and she secures it with a series of deliberate and time-honored actions. First, she shoots the heavy iron bolt, its movement a loud, sharp, and satisfyingly metallic clank in the silence of the room. This is the first layer of security. Then for the second, she lifts a massive wooden bar, a piece of timber as thick as a man's arm, and settles it into the two great iron brackets that are fixed to the door and to the solid door frame. The tavern is now a fortress, a small, secure, and self-contained world, sealed against the unpredictable and often dangerous medieval night. She stands for a moment in the profound, absolute darkness and silence of the now completely sealed room. She is alone. The dozens of voices, the loud laughter, the music, the arguments, the clatter of the mugs, all are gone, leaving only the faint, ghostly, and almost imperceptible echo of their memory in the smoky and now rapidly cooling air. The tavern is hers now, a quiet, private space, her home. This moment of locking up is a moment of profound and a deeply meaningful transition. It marks the end of her public role as the alewife, the boisterous, the tough, and the commanding ruler of the common room. And it marks the beginning of her private existence, as a woman alone, or at least in charge, in her own home. She is surrounded by the soft, sleeping sounds of her small and her unconventional household, the quiet, rhythmic breathing of the potboy who is sleeping on a straw pallet in a corner of the kitchen, the soft, occasional and dreaming snore of the dog by the hearth, the faint, almost inaudible creak and groan of the old timbers of the house as they settle and contract in the cold night air. The tavern, for her, is not just a business, a place of commerce. It is her home. It is the place where she has lived and worked, and perhaps raised her children and buried her husband. Its rough, smoky, and deeply familiar reality is the very fabric of her life, the container of all her memories. As she stands in the darkness, a final, small, and personal ritual might take place. She may make the sign of the cross and say a quiet, final prayer. A prayer of thanks to God or to her patron saint for a safe and a profitable night. A prayer for protection, for her house, her home, her small and vulnerable household through the long, dark, and uncertain hours until the dawn. Then, taking a single, small, and sputtering tallow candle to light her way, she makes her way up the steep, narrow, and creaking wooden stairs to her own small bedchamber in the room above the common room. The tavern is left to its own deep, silent, and now completely protected darkness. Let the deep, satisfying, and final sounds of the tavern being closed and secured bring a profound sense of safety and peace to your own mind. The road awaits. Again. The first thin and hesitant grey light of dawn is beginning to filter through the small cracks and knotholes in the tavern's heavy wooden shutters. The deep, absolute silence of the night is broken by the first definitive sound of the new day. The loud, confident, and slightly ragged crow of a rooster from a nearby backyard. The tavern, and the medieval world outside, is beginning to stir, to shake off the heavy, cold blanket of the night. Inside the common room, the air is cold, still, and stale, with the lingering, ghostly smells of last night's revelry. The fire in the hearth is a dead-looking and a seemingly lifeless mound of grey ash. But the first signs of a new day are beginning. The alewife, her form a dark, slow-moving shadow in the pre-dawn gloom, comes down the creaking stairs from her chamber. Her movements are still slow and stiff with sleep, but they are filled with the purpose of 1,000 other identical mornings. Her first act, always, is to go to the hearth. She takes the iron poker and gently, carefully, rakes away the top layer of the soft grey ash. She reveals the small, precious, and still glowing core of red embers that she so carefully preserved the night before. She adds a few dry and delicate wood shavings a handful of kindling, and then kneeling on the cold flagstones, she blows on the embers, gently at first, then more strongly, with a pair of well-worn leather bellows. A small, tentative, and almost magical flame flickers to life, and the heart of the tavern, the source of all its warmth and its life, begins to beat again. She moves to the door and the window, her movements the reverse of last night's ritual. The great, heavy wooden bar is lifted from its brackets, its sound a deep, groaning complaint in the quiet of the room. The iron bolt is drawn back with a sharp, metallic clank. The great oak door is swung open, letting in a blast of the cool, clean, and damp morning air, which begins the slow, daily work of clearing out the stale, smoky atmosphere of the room. Soon, the temporary residents of the tavern, the travellers who have spent the night sleeping in the relative warmth and safety of the stable, or on a rented straw pallet in a corner of the common room, begin to stir. We see the merchant, his head pounding from the ale, his hand, instinctively, going to the place inside his tunic where his purse used to be, his face clouding over with the sickening and the now fully realized memory of his loss. We see the pilgrim, who has slept soundly and has already said his morning prayers, his face calm and ready for the next stage of his sacred journey. They do not linger for a leisurely breakfast. The morning meal in the tavern is a quick, a simple, and a purely functional affair. It is a piece of hard, stale bread, perhaps a slice of cold, hard cheese, and a mug of the small ale, the weak, the watery, and the slightly sour brew that is the standard and the safest morning drink of the medieval world. They are eager to be on their way to take advantage of the precious hours of daylight for their journey. They gather their meagre belongings, they shoulder their packs, they pay the alewife for their lodging and their simple meal. And then, one by one, they pass through the great oak door, leaving the smoky and the now familiar comfort of the tavern, and stepping out into the new, the uncertain, and the challenging world of the new day. The road awaits. It is a world of possibility, but it is also a world of peril. The merchant must now try to recoup his losses, his journey made all the more difficult and all the more anxious by the events of the night. The pilgrim has another 20 miles to walk before he will reach his next resting place, his body already aching at the thought of it. The world outside the tavern is the world of work, of travel, of danger, of the endless, grinding and unsentimental reality of medieval life. The tavern for them has been a temporary and a now a fondly, if a hazily remembered interlude. It was a single night's safe harbour in the long and the often stormy voyage of their lives. It was a place of warmth, of company, of a temporary and an intoxicating escape from their worries. Now they must carry the memory of that warmth and the lingering ache in their heads with them out into the cold and the unforgiving reality of the road. As the last of the travellers departs, the tavern settles into its own different daytime rhythm, the locals soon to drift in for their morning cup and a bit of gossip. The great nightly drama is over. The life of the tavern, like the road itself, goes on. Let us leave them now, the travellers stepping out into the pale, clean light of a new morning, ready to face the world again.